Good afternoon in Greensboro, Boker Tov in Berkeley, Erev Tov in Beersheba, and greetings to all friends of Israel all around Chicago and all around the world. My name is Wayne Firestone. I'm the Executive Director of the America-Israel Friendship League, and today our Friends Indeed series continues with a focus on creative community leadership during the COVID-19 crisis. For everybody on the call today, whether you're on Zoom or on Facebook, we'd love to know where you're calling in from today. So if you want, just send us a quick chat and let us know where you're sitting, where you're standing. We're grateful you're joining this wonderful conversation. For everybody that's joining us live today, if you'd like to send us a question, send a question to one of the panelists, and we'll do our best to make sure we get to it during the webcast, and we'll just try to get to as many as possible. For everybody that happens to be watching on Facebook, please turn on your watch party so that your other friends can tune in as well, and they can join us live. Now, I want to begin with my colleague, Rabbi Eric Greenberg, the head of multi-faith affairs at American Israel Friendship League. He will help moderate the panel and field questions from the audience. Rabbi Greenberg, take it away.
Thank you, Wayne. Welcome to everyone who's watching on Zoom, Facebook, and any other platform that's out there. With the amazing panelists we have today, I think it's best to dive right in. It's clear we're living in extraordinary times. Never before has there been a world pandemic tearing at the fabric of society in the way it is today. Illness, death, unemployment, all skyrocketing, challenging our physical, psychological, and spiritual lives. Faith and community leaders are at the forefront of responding to these concerns. We are proud to have assembled today a group of esteemed and noted Chicago faith and community leaders to share what their traditions teach us about dealing with crisis, helping their own communities as well as those of their neighbors. This has been a remarkable time for people of different faiths and ethnicities to come together for the betterment of all society. I'm privileged today to welcome our panelists to what promises to be an enlightening and inspiring discussion. Here's some background on each of them. First up is Pastor Chris Harris Sr. Pastor Harris is a native of Chicago and a senior pastor of Bright Star Church. Pastor Harris recognized the need for more community-minded clergy, and due to increasing violence in Chicago, he established Bright Star Community Outreach. Bright Star is committed to creating collaborative partnership program models designed to provide educational enrichment programs, anti-violence prevention, and other intervention activities. In addition, Pastor Harris travels the country building relationships between African American and Jewish clergy. His trip to Israel in 2012 prompted the development of the Turn Center, the Urban Resilience Network, based on the Israeli model of Natal and Tel Aviv. This project utilizes faith leaders as post-trauma counselors, and it uses community surveys as the basis for services that directly correspond to the unique needs of its constituents. Next is Rabbi Michael Siegel, who holds the Norman Asher Rabbinic Chair at Anshe Emet. A graduate of Hiram College, Rabbi Siegel was ordained in 1982 by the Jewish Theological Seminary. He came to Anshe Emet in 1982 as assistant rabbi and was named senior rabbi in 1990. Rabbi Siegel is a dedicated leader in the Jewish community, both locally and nationally. He serves on the Executive Council of the Rabbinical Assembly of America, the Jewish Theological Seminary's Chancellor's Rabbinic Cabinet, and the Executive Board of Mazon, a Jewish resource to hunger, to name just a few. Rabbi Siegel has been an avid supporter of AIPAC and is a leader in the creation of their synagogue initiative. He's worked hard to bridge the gap between African Americans and Jews in Chicago and nationally through outreach to clergy. He has worked to develop a study group between rabbis and African American clergy, which has helped to deepen the dialogue and understanding among religious leaders. In addition, Rabbi Siegel currently serves as a board member for Bright Star Community Outreach, so he works in partnership with Pastor Harris. By both speaking in African American churches and conducting hunger seders, Rabbi Siegel is working to change the perceptions and recreate the historic bond between these two communities. We're also honored to have with us Ariel Arada, who serves as counsel for academic and community affairs at the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest. Ms. Rada was born to a Jewish family in Ethiopia and immigrated to Israel with her family in 1984. She grew up most of her life in the southern city of Beersheba. In 2010, Ms. Rada completed her BA in Government Diplomacy and Strategy, and later an MA in Conflict Resolution at the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya. In the Army, she served as a commander of soldiers and trained new recruits. She joined the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2015. A year later, she was appointed as the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Israeli Embassy to Peru, where she was responsible for politics, press, culture, and international aid. In addition to English and Hebrew, she also speaks Spanish and Amharic. In Hebrew, we say, Acharon, Acharon Chaviv. The last is much loved. So let me now also introduce a longtime dear friend, Father John Polakovsky. John is a member of the Order of Friar Servants of Mary and was ordained at the University of St. Mary of the Lake. He's one of the founding faculty members of the Catholic Theological Union and served on the faculty from 1968 until his retirement in 2017. But retirement is not really an accurate word to describe John. He continues to be an active participant in the Christian-Jewish dialogue, as well as the wider interreligious dialogue that he's been involved with for nearly 50 years. He served for 6 years as president of the International Council of Christians and Jews, and has served several terms on the board of the Parliament of the World's Religions. He was deeply involved in the development of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, and he served 4 terms on its board by presidential appointment. John has been a participant in 3 United Nations international conferences on world peace, alternative energy, and human trafficking. He's received numerous awards, fellowships, doctorates from such prestigious institutions as Cambridge University, the Graduate Theological Union, and Hebrew Union College. Thank you all for being here. So now we're going to turn to our panelists to discuss what their faith tradition teaches about addressing crises in their own community, but more, coming to the aid of their neighbors and less fortunate in our society. I'd like to ask Rabbi Siegel to get us started. Rabbi Michael?
It's my pleasure. Let me begin with what motivates me. And it begins at the opening chapters of the Bible, the whole notion of Tselem Elohim, that each human being is created in the image of God, and that we have an obligation to take care of ourselves, but we also have an obligation to see each other as creations in the image of God. And it's an indicator, to me at least, of how God sees us. But what we see in the Bible is that in the story of Cain and Abel, that notion of Tselem Elohim, of being created in the image of God, isn't enough. People do cruel things. People act in selfish ways. And so the response of Cain to God is one that redounds throughout the Bible. Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's keeper? I believe that the rest of the Torah, and frankly, the rest of the Bible, is the response to that question. Yes, you are your brother's keeper. I think the patriarchs and the matriarchs were exemplars of this idea, but it's at Sinai that that message goes out. And without that idea, God couldn't tell us, V'ahavta l'reacha chamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. Moses couldn't pray to God and say, heal my sister Miriam, elna rifana. God couldn't command us to pick up the person who is weighted down or to take care of the poor. All of these ideas speak to my heart about the obligation that we have to each other and to raise each other up and to continue to see each other not only through our eyes, but through the eyes of God. And so when it comes to COVID-19, I think we do what we need to do to heal, to protect. In our tradition, we base ourselves on the idea of pikuach nefesh, of the importance of saving a life. And so all the things that we've done in our own congregation are really to protect each other and to ensure each other's safety. That's an obligation that we share. But I want to suggest that that obligation, that chiyuv, based upon the idea of the image of God in each of us, based upon the call of Sinai, extends to other communities. And what has been so heartening to me is to see the response in our congregation and in the community at large. Because as COVID-19 has become more expressed in our country, we also see the expression of the disparities of our society. And so it is for us to hear the call and to respond. And I'm really proud of the efforts that we are making in that area as well. It's not just about marching together, but it's also about feeding, it's about supporting, and it's about a larger plan of how do we continue to walk together based upon an obligation that comes to us from God.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for starting us off. That's beautiful. Father John?
Well, I mean, if you go back to the New Testament, certainly the story of the Good Samaritan is one building block for our response today. But the Good Samaritan story only brings to the surface a theme that was very central to the ministry of Jesus, namely that those on the margins needed to be affirmed and their human dignity needed to be recognized. Jesus spent quite a bit of time working with people on the margins and defending people on the margins. That theme, because the Catholic Church at least is a church that takes its values from Scripture, but also from what we call tradition, Scripture sort of interpreted in the more contemporary context, we see how in more recent years the Catholic tradition has moved to a recognition of the basic linkage among all people and the need to recognize human dignity as a central foundation of authentic faith belief for Catholics, but we would say also for others. A tremendous change took place at the Second Vatican Council in the document on religious liberty, which was a very hard-fought document. And some people didn't accept it then and continue not to accept it. But that document really reversed our understanding of the other in terms of the Catholic tradition, because previous to that, a lot of human dignity and human rights were seemingly dependent on correct belief, and that correct belief, of course, was Catholic belief in the mind of people at that time. But at the Second Vatican Council, it was stated very clearly that human dignity and human rights are a birthmark. They are a birthright of all people, no matter what their belief and so on. So that was a major change that has led to a much stronger commitment to human rights and human dignity. And certainly we take that value to the challenges we face, the dual challenges we face in this particular hour in our country, both the COVID crisis and also the structural racism that has been put before our eyes, both by COVID in some ways, but especially in and through the very important protests that have taken place and are still taking place in terms of our nation. I would also bring just one point of history to this. The relationship, particularly between Catholics and Jews, but not exclusively, really started in a way in the 1930s and 1940s.
John?
That was when Monsignor John Ryan forged a coalition which really brought together the people who are most suffering economic deprivation in this country. And it happens to have been primarily Catholics and Jews. The Protestants were also in this coalition, but that coalition transformed so much of this country through its support of the legislation proposed by President Roosevelt in his efforts to overcome the Depression.
And we're going to, Father John, we're going to deal with some of that later in the program. Let me try to get in Pastor Harris and Ariella. Pastor Harris.
Sure. First of all, thank you guys so much for having me today. And it's always good to be amongst my friends. When you really think about it, one of the things that I think is so important is the biblical perspective of why I do what I do. And as we serve, and I will just kind of share this, I think one of the most important things is, as you see those folks that are on the screen right now, it's really, we serve them based on what the scripture says. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, it says, let your light so shine that men may see your good works and glorify the Father which is in heaven. And the reality is Jesus challenges Peter and said, if you love me, feed my sheep, feed my lamb. Whatever you do unto others, the least of these, you've done it unto me. And I think it's important. But one of the things that I will say is I have the biblical, spiritual, and moral responsibility to serve the people that are on the screen. I think it's really, really important the way that we tend to look at it. And I love that more than anything when Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, it says, let your light so shine that men may see your good works. Not your good word, which is preaching, sermons, not your good worship, which is singing songs, but it says that men may see your good works and glorify the Father which is in heaven. So there are so many folks who love to stay within the confines of the worship facility, whether it be the church, the temple, the mosque, the synagogue. They stay within those buildings. But how do you touch people? You really go where they are. And I am excited about the fact that I heard one of the faith leaders talk about the Good Samaritan. The way that I tend to look at it is community is congregation. And that spiritual responsibility to serve humanity is what I believe that God called us to do. And it's always exciting to be able to be amongst others who believe the same way and get the work done.
Thank you. Thank you all. Ariella, now I'd like to turn to you with this question. Governments in both the United States and Israel have had to respect and work with many religious denominations during this pandemic. These guidelines and restrictions were implemented for religious services and other social gatherings at houses of worship. Can you tell us a little about the situation in Israel and why you think it was easier for Israel to implement such guidelines with minimal resistance?
So first of all, I just want to start by saying that it's absolutely an honor to be with this distinguished speakers. And as I relate to your question, so I think that first of all, Israel is different from other states because of the size of the state, right? It's a smaller state and you can control it better than the US that is huge and other big states. The handling with the pandemic was basically in Israel was really smooth, and there was no differences in the approach in the terms of the local government. It means the city, the mayors, everybody was on the same page. They had the same instructions, and their main concern was, of course, protecting their citizens. And I think, and also one of the things that you saw during the pandemic in Israel was the leadership of different faith leaders in terms of the Christian community, the Arab community, and even the ultra-Orthodox community. There was the Arab community and the ultra-Orthodox community. There was challenges in the beginning, which I can dive in or explain later in terms of the language and mass gathering and funerals and prayers. But at the end of the day, all the leaders combined forces and joined in order to combat this pandemic, because they understood that it's something that is bigger than all of us, that it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what is your religious, you have to combine forces. And all of them had instructed their communities to stay at home, stay safe. Mosque was closed. Numbers of people to attend synagogues were reduced. And all of this was during a lot of significant holidays, such as Easter that is one of the most important and holy holiday for Christianity, and the same goes to the Ramadan. But then in Israel, you saw that in the Arab society, the numbers was not different from the rest of the population. The Orthodox is a different story, which I can elaborate later, of course. But at the end of the day, I think that the size of the country and the fact that everybody was on the same page and the great leadership that arise from this pandemic made the case of Israel be, better or succeed in terms of collaborating and going forward from there.
Great, which again shows how important the leadership of our faith and community leaders are in these times of crisis. Which brings me to Pastor Harris and Rabbi Siegel. I'd like to ask you both to talk a little about the COVID crisis in your own congregations, and then share some of the challenges you're facing and have faced in working together in these circumstances.
As always, I'll let Rabbi Siegel go first.
Sure. Look, our congregation, like most congregations, understood the challenge of the moment and put the safety of the people in the congregation first. I was amazed, as I think most clergy are, at how quickly congregations were able to pivot. And we can talk about going on Zoom and streaming our services and all of that, but it was really in the voluntarism that we started to see almost immediately of how do we deal with the loneliness of COVID-19, and people just coming out and saying, I'm going to make phone calls, young people going and shopping for people who can't get to the grocery store, the meals that we gave to people, the financial assistance that was created. All of this happened almost seamlessly, and something that I am really proud of. But I would also suggest that the COVID-19 pandemic has also cast a very harsh light on the disparities of American society. And I'm so thankful that Pastor Harris and I have built a relationship over 7 or 8 years already, where we have a foundation and we have credibility in our communities beyond our church and synagogue, but well beyond that, to really build a coalition and a response. And Pastor Harris has been such a remarkable leader. I'm going to let him continue and tell the story.
No, and I think, Michael is absolutely right. And it has been a privilege over these last 8 years to be able to do this work. And specifically in responding to COVID, we created, before COVID, we created a trauma helpline based on the Israeli model of Natal. Michael is on the board. He's also, by the way, the assistant pastor of Bright Star Church. Just so you guys know, our work has been able to help that trauma helpline. It spiked. As you can see on the screen, we've been giving plenty boxes of food to folks in the greater Bronzeville community because of COVID. And I want you to understand, a lot of the African-American folks were not able to get jobs before COVID. So after COVID, 40 million people are now out of jobs. So now the people who already couldn't get a job, you got 40 million people in front of them. So what do those people do about food? What do they do about rental assistance? What do they do about health insurance? They just don't have it. And so our partnership has allowed us to serve people. We do counseling, mentorship, parenting, workforce development, and advocacy. But because of this, we had to turn into, a food distributor. And then think about it. A lot of the folks, we lost 3 members to COVID. My brother had COVID. My father literally died and was revived, thank God. And people who have COVID, they can't go to the hospital. They couldn't go to the funerals. So we took our cameras, updated it, and let people have virtual homegoing services online because of our partnership. 10 people could come in, but thousands were watching all over the place because of the work that we're doing. And I'm grateful for this partnership that Michael and I have built, and so many others. For example, the consulate. Every time we need a resource, Consul General of Israel is literally our greatest ambassador. And it's exciting that all of our communities can come together and say, we're better together, but to serve humanity.
Wonderful. a great model for the rest of the country as well. Father John, with your long history of interreligious relations, what are your observations about how this moment in time compares to both positively and negatively to previous instances of interfaith cooperation? And do you think, are we heading in the right trajectory?
Well, as I was saying earlier on, there was this very interesting coalition in the 30s and 40s, which really kind of preceded the sort of emphasis in various recent documents on interreligious understanding, that there should be a dialogue of text, but there also needed to be a dialogue of action. And what Monsignor John Ryan's coalition was able to accomplish was really to enhance the economic status of Catholics and Jews, who were in many cases at the bottom of the economic rung at that time and suffering the consequences of that status. Today, I think one of the great challenges that has come about is the hospital scene. I have a very good close friend here, a priest of the Archdiocese, who's a chaplain at one of the hospitals in the nearby suburbs. And it's a hospital that serves a lot of the Latinx, as well as even the Muslim community, and so on. But the staff is also very multi-religious. And he has described to me his role of not only ministering to the needs of the people who are all different faiths, but who can't be with their family at the time of serious illness and even as they're dying. And also the staff, because the staff of the hospital is very interreligious. And I think we always haven't appreciated the kind of emotional toll that caring for COVID victims has produced for the staff of the hospitals. So that kind of joint ministry is very important. I think we need to recognize, we used to, when we were preparing for the 1993 100th anniversary celebration of the Parliament of the World's Religions, which was part of the Chicago World's Fair, we had a kind of motto. And the motto was, the world isn't coming to Chicago, the world is already in Chicago. And it's not just Chicago, it's every large metropolitan city in the world that has now become religiously pluralistic. And no one religious community can solve the major issues facing those communities of poverty, healthcare, racism, and so on. We have to do it together as brothers and sisters. And I think we need to recognize that interreligious action is not something that's on the margins of a religious tradition today. It has to become a core element of our perception of who we are in our particularistic religious traditions. The ties to others is now an integral part, or should become an integral part of our self-definition, whether it's our self-definition as Catholics, Protestants, Sikhs, Muslims, Jews, etc.
Right. Thank you. With that, Ariella, I'd like to ask a little bit about what the consulate in Chicago has planned to work in the community to enhance its relationship with the various ethnicities and faith groups in Chicago.
So as you mentioned, we're doing a lot of activities in different sectors, but regarding the communities, we're having a lot of cooperations and with various leaders in the community. Pastor Harris is, of course, one of them. We always refer to him as the champion. So every time that we're talking about, an activity that we want to do, and with either Pastor Harris or Rabbi Siegel, that is also a great friend of ours and help us with a lot of things that we want to execute here in the Midwest. But we always say that the most important thing here is to identify those champions of the communities that can help us, enhance the relationship with their community. And one of the things that we want to do is, we were talking also with Pastor Harris and others in order to see if we can help the community in terms of food maybe, or medicines, or anything that we can contribute. As we always mention, Israel was for a long time, for years, receiving the help and the assistance of the United States, our greatest ally. But we also want to give back when we can. And so we are talking with them to see how we can plan an activity that will help those communities that was affected from the corona. One of the things that I was doing before this pandemic started, I went to a visit in the West Side, and I met different communities there that they have urban guards, right? So they plant their own vegetables, and this is their main way of providing to the community. We started a plan to try to bring an Israeli expert that maybe can help them expand this program. The pandemic started, and with that, it was stopped. But I can tell you that this is something that is on our agenda, and we are going to make it happen. And so we have like that kind of activities with different communities.
Great, great. We actually have a couple of good questions from the audience I'd like to read out now. Pastor Harris referred to the faith community mobilizing outside of their sanctuaries. In what ways have congregants mobilized to help others that they haven't before? Perhaps this is, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that question a great deal. And clearly that wasn't planned. So, one of the ways that we've done it most recently, when you think in the wake of George Floyd, right? And the unfortunate systemic racism that is protecting or producing police brutality. And this George Floyd issue is not brand new. It's been happening for many, many years, and thousands of Black men and women have been murdered due to racism. Ahmaud Arbery, right? That wasn't a police situation. That was just a racist white man who killed him. And so we have been moving on this Black Lives Matter piece. And I want to say this first and foremost. Most people, especially my Jewish friends, many of them get nervous about the term because they know of the Black Lives Matter organization. But let me be clear. There are many Black people that don't know about the Black Lives Matter organization. No one person, no group, no organization, no entity can own that term. Black Lives Matter should be a mindset for all of humanity. And what happened was we were looking at all of the people who were protesting, and the Lord said to me on a Friday night, sitting in my basement, as I was looking at the news, where's the faith community? And so I sent a text message out to a few friends on Saturday. Rabbi Siegel was one of those people. We announced it on Sunday, and in 48 hours, more than 10,000 from the Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Baha'i, Catholic community, Latinx, and so many others joined us in what we call the Black Metropolis. They came to Bronzeville and they marched with us saying Black Lives Matter as one team. And it was super exciting. And we got a diverse group of faith leaders partnering with us. And we did it on June 2nd. Many people don't realize, but Bronzeville is known as the Black Metropolis. It is where the Great Migration ended. People who were leaving away from racism and trying to escape racism down south, they came to Chicago and they ended up in Bronzeville. They couldn't go to the east, which was Hyde Park, because they were racist. They couldn't go to the west, which was a Bridgeport, because they were racist. So they stayed in the Black Metropolis. And then we marched down Dr. Martin Luther King Drive, and we were excited. And then the mayor reached out. Following week, the Lord said, go bigger. And the mayor reached out, put me on a press conference. People can see that on our brightstarchurchchicago.com website or our Bright Star Church Chicago YouTube page. And I said, Mayor, since we all can't have church, let us come together for this purpose. And all unified say Black Lives Matter And now we're getting ready to go to Grant Park, downtown Chicago on Juneteenth. That's this Friday, 12 o'clock p.m. And I'm excited about it. We're calling it the City of Chicago's largest lunch and learn, because we're going to allow people to chew on and digest the truth of the African-American lived experience in this racist country.
Thank you, Pastor.
Can I just, can I pick up
Yeah,
on
please
that for
go
a
ahead.
second?
Go ahead, Reverend
Okay.
Mike.
I'm a little embarrassed because I don't have all the slides behind me, but
My slides are your slides. We work together.
okay.
This is interfaith cooperation.
I want to underscore one of the points that Pastor Harris made. The Black Lives Matter issues, as far as the platform goes, has been is a real issue, but we also have to understand that we are in a historic moment in time of real transformation that's happening at warp speed. Things are moving very quickly. And I can't emphasize enough how important the interfaith community is to move things forward, because we have been frozen, our political process is frozen, and I do think that our religious leaders are going to have to be the force for real sustained change. But I also want to say that the Jewish people have to be at this table. This is the time to be at the table, to stand with our Black brothers and sisters at this time and go forward together. And only through building relationships are we going to be able to understand each other, hear each other, appreciate our differences, but also understand that our faith traditions are going to propel us forward together. And as Pastor Harris says so beautifully, we are better together.
Mm.
I'd like to add to that, because I'd like to support what Rabbi Siegel just said and what Pastor Harris said. I think we have the example of how the religious community came together right after the assassination of Dr. King and held the kind of historic a conference on religion and race, which took place here in Chicago. And that really led to a support of the legislation, the civil rights legislation. I think, unfortunately, in more recent years, some of that spirit has waned. And Cardinal Supich here in Chicago has announced an effort to create a curriculum on racism, including structural racism, for use this fall in the Catholic churches and schools of the Archdiocese. And I think we really, as Catholics, have to take that very, very seriously. I think there have been Catholics who have been very much involved, including Catholic clergy, in the effort to really address the issues of structural racism. However, in the main, many Catholic churches, especially Catholic churches located in predominantly African-American areas, have not really been part of the effort at fundamental change. They may be doing some what I would call charitable work, providing food and meals for the homeless and so on. That's all very good, and I don't mean to cast any kind of aspirations on it, but it has to go deeper than that. We really have to join the African American community in pushing for an end to structural racism. And I think it's incumbent upon the Catholic Church, the white Protestant churches, the other, certainly the Jewish community, and other religious communities in Chicago to really stand with the African community, finally to construct, to really address what many call white privilege and how that has impacted in a negative way many people in the African American community. And I think we can be a strong, unified voice. I hope we will become a strong, unified voice.
I would say this, and Father, I'm so glad to hear you say that, and I really hope that they will show up. Not only this Friday as an opportunity to meet us at Roosevelt and Columbus to march into Grant Park, but I think it's important what you just said, and I certainly hope so many other colleagues will say, hey, I agree with what Father John has said, because it's really going to take more than words at this point, right? Everybody talks a good game, and nothing frustrates me as a Black man to hear someone say, I stand with you, but when I look to my right or my left, I don't see your feet. No, no, no. Nothing frustrates me more than, the Martin Luther King moments where we celebrate his birthday and link arms and sing We Shall Overcome. And one of the things Rabbi Siegel and I tell everybody, we shouldn't sing that song if we don't come over into each other's community to learn about the lived experience and do what we can to change it. Even when we're traveling the country, the first thing people say to us, whether it's him speaking in Black churches or in synagogues, challenging his colleagues, or me traveling on college campuses, training young men from Alpha Epsilon Pi, or singing a Hatikva, and the first thing people do is they say, oh man, Pastor Harris, our histories are so close together and we have similar suffering. And they show us a picture of Dr. Martin Luther King and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And then they say, look at there, here's proof. And I say, no. That's not really a fact, because the reality is that was decades ago. Don't take credit today for what they did then. If you want to impress me, let's keep the frame, and then let's put some new pictures in it of us marching together now. So I hope people will adhere to what you're encouraging. We need them to show up.
Thank you. We are getting some great questions here. I'm going to try to throw a couple at the panelists. This is for Ariella. Israel has many resources and experiences dealing with trauma and isolation. How has this evolved during the current crisis, and in what ways can that be leveraged in U.S. communities like Chicago?
Well, as a response to your question, I think that the best example that I can give is actually Natal and Pastor Harris and Rabbi Siegel and that is operating in Brownsville, which together with the consulate, they are changing the life of the community. It is a program that helps the community to deal with PTSD. A lot of people, they are not aware to the fact that they have PTSD. And so basically Pastor Harris and Stern Center are using the model of Natal, the Israeli organization, in order to help their community with dealing with those PTSD that was a result of violence that they experienced. And so this is one of the models that we are executing here. Another thing, during the pandemic, we also had a lot of activities and connections between Israeli companies and technologies that they have to reduce the spread in communities, in cities, in states, and to the government and the state level people representative here in the Midwest. And we actually had a lot of great connections that not only offered technologies to reduce the amount of infected, but also right now we're working on connections in terms of Israeli technologies that offer to improve the economic situation by giving dividends to businesses and citizens in order to make their economic situation better. So those are the models or things or technologies that we have that we apply here right now. And of course we have a lot of them, but specifically regarding the pandemic, those are the main ones. And I think that Pastor Harris maybe can say a short sentence about Natal and the great job that they're doing.
Sure, absolutely. I think it has been amazing. It was Rabbi Siegel who encouraged me to go to Israel. And I got to tell you, it has been amazing seeing the work that we've been able to do. And Natal came over and they trained us. And since we opened up that helpline, I got to tell you, more than 40, if you scroll up a bit, I'll scroll down, it allows you to see more than 40,000 people have literally been impacted by the fact that I brought Natal here to Israel. It was because of gun violence in our city. At that time, when I went to Israel in December of 2012, 1,142 people have been murdered. Now it's over 5,500 people who have been murdered in Chicago. And that doesn't include those who have been shot or wounded. And we asked the question, who did or does the trauma counseling for those families? Whether it be the victim's family or the perpetrator's family, in most cases, nobody. Black and brown people don't go to counseling for 4 reasons. They don't know, trust, or think they can afford the counseling. And then number 4, the stigma. Nobody wants to be labeled crazy, but they still come and talk to me, faith leaders. So I said, I want to identify, train, and certify faith and community leaders to provide trauma counseling based on the Israeli model of Natal. And so Michael and I have been able to bring them over with the partnership of Northwestern Hospital, University of Chicago, the United Way, the Jewish Federation, Cigna, the MacArthur Foundation. They did training of faith leaders. We have a helpline that is open that has touched more than 600 people. We have, and it has spiked during COVID. We have more than 44,000 people who have been made trauma aware. And the 5 competencies is counseling, mentorship, parenting, workforce development, and advocacy. And we created a model that we can replicate across the country and other urban communities.
I just want to add one very quick note to that. That what this relationship has also done has been a great example of hasbara, of the way in which Israel is perceived in the African American community, right? This isn't, CNN, and it's not AIPAC out there and everybody has their role to play, but this is just people coming in, learning about each other, understanding each other, and not trying to preach to each other, but try to help each other. And the results are remarkable. So, kudos to Natal, but again, kudos to Pastor Harris for having the wherewithal to take the idea and run with it and really build something remarkable.
Right.
Definitely. And if I can just add, I will also say that I think that this is the example of faith leaders and, champions in the communities that took a project and made it happen. And so that this is the example of the specific topic that we're talking about today.
That's great. So 2 other really wonderful questions from the audience. One person wants to know what challenges to leadership, both that you've had yourself or that you've seen, from Vatican on down, that has come about as a result of COVID-19. Some of the responses, and maybe in a personal way, you can tell us how you've dealt with that.
I don't mind starting. I want to say, honestly, I can't stand this. I hate it. I miss the congregation. I miss being amongst the people. It has challenged me in ways where I have to be innovative, have to be creative. And I always tell people, especially with what we're going through now, everybody has to do it virtually, worship. The worst thing we can do is try 8-track ministry in an iPad generation, right? You really do have to rethink the way it is done, or you'll miss an entire generation of people, especially now. I think the other side of it is it has caused us to have to do more than what we were already doing. I don't know about you guys, but I work harder now than I ever have, right? I'm completely zoomed out.
That's correct.
Right? It is constant. And so those are the ways that I've been challenged because before COVID, I was trying to find balance, but the moment I was getting close to finding it, COVID destroyed it.
I guess, what I'd like to add to that is that the negative side, as Pastor Harris made so clear, revolves around the community coming together, just the sense of being able to shake someone's hand, give someone a hug, see them, and kind of appreciate them. That's all true. But we have also learned a tremendous amount about what our capabilities are technologically. And I don't think that the clock is going to go back once, God willing, maybe soon, that there is some sort of medicine to help us fight COVID-19. I think that we're going to be able to reach out in more thoughtful and creative ways than ever before, but we're going to have to go where the community is and continue to build, because this is going to be a long road. And I just want to say that there's also positive things that we're learning about what our capabilities are.
You know, Father John, with your experience with Religions for Peace, Parliament of World Religions, you have, you know, this sort of global perspective. Do you have any thoughts on a practical plan for us to increase this multi-faith cooperation and bring in as well, someone mentioned earlier, you know, Hindus and Buddhists and Sikhs and you know, sort of increase that activity?
Well, I think there needs to be fundamentally a recognition, looking at it from each religious tradition. We can't do it alone. That we have to really form collaborative relationships that allow us to be working together. But in order to do that, we also have to come to know each other much better. And we also have to, I think, moderate to some extent any sense of religious superiority. I think religious superiority is still a mindset that exists in many religious traditions and which is detrimental to the kind of collaborative venture that I think we need at this time. I've been part of a new Vatican commission that is working on the relationship between COVID-19 and sustainability of creation. Because we cannot, even though COVID-19 and the structural racism that is now before us has been there, but it's now been brought to the surface in a way that hadn't previously, that we need to find ways of collaborating to basically sustain human society. And what, for example, I saw in the climate march in New York several years ago, how young people across interreligious lines have been come together to really support the common home of all humanity. And that common home has to be marked by a fundamental equality of human status. And that's what we're still working on, and we need to continue to work on. And I think groups like Religions for Peace, like the Parliament of the World's Religions, like the United Religions Initiative, are trying to do that, to bring people together and learn new ways. I mean, one of the things I have learned, for example, in my work with the Parliament, is a new understanding of what we have traditionally called people of pagan orientation, which was very negative. That many of these people are deeply spiritual, and we've come also to understand the structural racism of our native indigenous brothers and sisters in this country. I mean, some of the worst effects of COVID are on the reservations. And I think we have to be mindful of that as well.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we need more inspiring stories in the world. And I'd like to ask each of you, as we head towards the top of the hour, to share your most inspiring story that you've experienced out of the you know, the current pandemic, something that really gets you through the day when everything else is going, you know, not as well. So whoever would like to take that first, but I'd like for each of you to consider that.
So I think that I can start. One of the things that we saw in Israel during the pandemic that really made me feel proud was the sense of togetherness of people, and the sense of understanding that we are all together in this crisis, and we have to assist each other. We have to help the elderly. We have to help those vulnerable people and from the community that cannot go out and can't do basically anything. And there was a lot of acts of kindness. People that were singing for older people from the window just to make them laugh. People that went with their mask and gloves and everything protected so they won't infect anybody else in order to distribute food. and basic things that that are needed. And so there was a lot of acts that I saw in Israel of just being there for each other. And like Rabbi Siegel said, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," just loving the other and helping each other. And I think that this was one of those moments, and it was quite a lot of them, that I felt like, you know what, yes, there is a pandemic, and yes, it's completely challenging and difficult, but at the end of the day, you see this goodness and this way of assisting each other that makes you understand that you still have hope, and the future will be much, much better.
Follow up on that, I think for me, what has been most amazing is that we have found that there still exists a very deep sense of commitment among many people. We sometimes talk about the hardness of contemporary society, the sort of don't care attitude, the attitude that says, I'm in it only for the financial gain or for what benefits me. And what we've seen here unlocked in the COVID crisis is, I think, a deep level of human goodness that perhaps was being locked up for a while, and which this crisis has unleashed in big and small ways, including small acts of courage, small acts of human kindness. And that is the basis, I think, of hope for the future, despite the challenges we continue to face.
I guess what I would add to that is that what COVID-19 has done for us is it reminded us that all of us are vulnerable and we are all dependent on one another. And our codependency here is an opportunity for small acts of heroism, whether it's the people who have been first responders or the someone helping someone else on the street. There are a myriad of stories of the quiet, silent hero who's out there doing something that's making a difference. And so we're in it together. And that's the great opportunity that we've been presented with. And unfortunately, our society is a little too susceptible to the negative, and we are too reticent to celebrate the positive. And there are millions and millions of positive stories. So what keeps me going is the fact that people are dependent on me to keep them safe, and I'm dependent on them to keep them safe, and that together we can create not only a healthier world, but a better world.
And I will say this, and I will only show this just to get on Michael's nerves because I have slides. But, for many, many years, I've been going into the Jewish community. And what I would like to say is what this moment has done is show me not only are there still people of goodwill that exist, but people have heard me. I've always told my Jewish friends, don't ask me to lobby for Israel if I can't ask you to come and support and lobby for Bronzeville. And I'm literally watching this better together work that Michael and I have been working for years to make happen come to pass. When we marched to see Jews from the conservative, Reformed, and Orthodox community supporting us, marching with us, come on, this is COVID-19. And again, only Black people are asked to deal with a pandemic named COVID, and then an epidemic called racism, and so much other stuff at the same time. And then our friends are literally risking their lives to come and march with us because they see that we are losing our lives due to bad health, bad policing, and so much other stuff. So I am grateful to God that everything I've been saying to my community as it relates to we have friends that don't look like us or live like us who want to come into our community, they're seeing that it is real. And I've been telling my friends, don't ask me to go all the way to Israel, thousands of miles away, and you won't come a few miles away to come and hang with me and support my community. So I'm grateful because we're literally seeing our communities being better together. I'm really excited about that.
Wow. And we are so grateful to all of you This was inspiring, educational, a productive conversation, and I think needs to be heard around the country and replicated, the kinds of relationships that you all are building, have built, and are building to go into the future. Thank you all for being here. As I said last night to someone, when I'm typing now about this, my fingers are praying, to paraphrase my hero, Abraham Joshua Heschel. So we're going to wrap up. I'd like to thank everyone again, and let me remind our audience that the America-Israel Friendship League will continue to run these live webinars throughout the summer with participants from Israel and throughout the United States. We hope you will join us again on Wednesdays and Sundays for an array of topics and activities. You can go to our website and our social media channels to find out the latest information. Thank you again, all of you. Very inspiring. Everyone, please stay safe, wear a mask, and wash your hands.
Yeah, I'm with you. Thank you.
Thank you.